Just to introduce myself, my name is Sharon Flynn. Karina mentioned me earlier, so I'm the National Coordinator of the NTutor project, and it's really lovely to be here. I'm so excited because we only finalised our branding within the last couple of weeks, and already I can see a pull-up poster over here and the lovely little cupcakes as well with the NTutor logo on. So I'm really impressed, particularly. Congratulations, Jessica, on putting all that together. I'm sure it was your hard work that did it. So this session, this parallel session, is on digital transformation in teaching and learning. We have got 5 presentations, including the first speaker is going to be Louise Nagel, who is the NTutor lead in MTU. So it's really brilliant to have her here. But 5 fantastic presentations going to happen over the next little while. I'm not going to say too much more, but just to say the format is about 15 minutes per presentation and then a few minutes for questions should they arise. The first two presentations are on site, and then we're going to move into the online mode. The wonders of modern technology. It's absolutely fantastic to see this hybrid experience in action. So I think that's enough for me. I'll invite Louise to come up onto the stage, and after Louise, she's going to be presenting on some work that she's been doing with Tom Farley, who's I'm sure known to many people here, and that will be followed on site by Dr. Aisling Crowley and Dr. Cormac Quigley, who will also be speaking, and then we'll move into the online session. So you're very welcome, Louise.
So thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you for the opportunity to present here today. So the title of my presentation is Student Experiences of ePortfolios within MTU. I supervise this research with my colleague, Dr. Tom Farley, and our student researcher was Fiona Walsh. Unfortunately, neither can be here today. We've just promoted our Twitter handles there, so please follow us. We're always looking for new followers. So this research was undertaken during the pandemic, which added a little bit of complication, I suppose, to the research. So to begin with, first challenge, I suppose, was to come up with a definition for ePortfolios. And it does seem to vary across research. So here we have a definition from Orna Farrell. So Orna, back in 21, spoke of ePortfolios centering around assessment, placement, and also mentioned that they can be used to collect evidence of graduate attributes. We have other definitions that came forward from Chen and Black. So they referred to ePortfolios as being multifaceted and can be a technology, a pedagogical approach, and a process as well as a product. Research I conducted with my colleagues in MTU, again with Tom Farley and with Mike O'Connell, found that academics use various technologies such as PebblePad, PathBright, and Mahara, and other academics curate content using YouTube, OneDrive, and even Dropbox, for example. The participating HEI in this case was the Kerry campus of MTU, and the campus had not adopted a standard ePortfolio platform for students at the time of the research. Rather, the tools that were used were at the discretion of the academic staff involved. And we could most definitely say that the majority of HEIs are at the early stage of ePortfolio adoption at present. So to go into the methodology, just briefly, the study, it adopted an exploratory case study design in a single HEI. It incorporated a mixed methods approach to data collection involving online surveys, and these were followed by semi-structured interviews. So following planning, piloting, and revision, a final survey incorporated 17 questions. So this survey was sent out to students on campus in early March 2021, and we did follow it with reminder emails as well. So we were lucky in that we got 72 responses. The survey was developed in MS Forms. And to capture the students' perspective, the decision was made to incorporate semi-structured interviews. So the reason we followed up with semi-structured interviews was to probe responses and to investigate the feelings, which the survey would never do. The interviews were carried out by the primary researcher. They were done online, given that we were in the pandemic at the time. And the interviews were conducted via Microsoft Teams and were about 20 minutes in duration. And one thing we as a research team were very pedantic about really was getting a wide range of views from disciplines across campus. So we did get representation from 6 academic departments across 3 academic schools. The quantitative data was analysed in SPSS, and analysis of the qualitative data from the semi-structured interviews and also the open-ended survey questions was done through interpretive phenomenological analysis, which is IPA. So this is a recent qualitative approach, which comes specifically from the field of psychology. And the rationale for using it was that it was conducive to analysing small samples, which enabled the researcher to conduct detailed and time-consuming case-by-case analysis. And it also gave the opportunity of capturing the perspectives of personal lived experience in more detail. So, findings. So we begin here by taking a look at the extent to which e-portfolios helped students with their study. So the majority of students indicated, as you can see here, that e-portfolios did help them to reflect on their learning. It helped them to evaluate and reflect on their learning process, helped them to keep track of their learning experiences, and also enabled them to reflect on any weaknesses that they felt they had. It is interesting to see that in terms of the challenges that e-portfolio implementation put on students, lack of time came up as the top, I suppose, constraint or challenge. So 44% of students reported this. And I'm going to come back to it because there's a little bit more, I suppose, detail that we went into in terms of time as a challenge. You can also see the lack of feedback from lecturers was perceived as a difficulty, as was the purpose of the e-portfolio itself. So students sometimes felt that they were undertaking the task of completing an e-portfolio and they really didn't understand the purpose of it. So in terms of time, so this came out, I suppose, as one of the major challenges that I mentioned. So time taken to complete an e-portfolio seemed to vary. So as the table indicates here, there was a wide variation on time spent on updating and maintaining the student e-portfolio. For example, over 40% of participants spent under 6 hours a month updating and maintaining it, whereas at the other end of the scale, 25% spent 14 hours or more on their e-portfolio. About approximately 48 agreed or strongly agreed that creating their e-portfolio took too much time, which was a bit of a deterrent, obviously. So the importance of implementing effective time management skills and strategies throughout the process of creating e-portfolios was highlighted in both the interview data and the open-ended responses. So, for example, one student just said the worst part of the entire process was the time involved. And another just mentioned that it takes a lot of time to build one, especially if you're not used to the technology. So my next table here was very interesting in that it took a look at how students rated their skills before and after implementing e-portfolios. So here on our table, where 1 is listed, it indicates there was no skills at all, and 5 is at the opposite end of the spectrum, indicating that advanced levels of skills were developed. So we can see here that there was a growth in the percentage of perceived digital skills advanced as a result of the e-portfolio implementation. So those who indicated that they had advanced skills rated at 5 in this table, we can see that it applies to the creating and editing of documents, to awareness in digital well-being, and such as privacy and security, and creating and editing digital images, for example. Now, it also appears that more work needs to be done in relation to the provision of supports for students who are using e-portfolios. A minority of students agreed that they received sufficient supports during the implementation of e-portfolios. Less than half agreed or strongly agreed that they received clear guidance on the purpose of creating the e-portfolios. Again, a minority agreed that they received training, adequate training, that the university provided them with sufficient supports in creating and managing their e-portfolios. But a majority, about 59%, agreed or strongly agreed that they received clear guidance on what was required to put in the e-portfolio. So although they were getting guidance on what was required for the assessment, sometimes they weren't sure of the purpose of it. So the challenges in terms of supports and resources, 80% identified that frequent access to computer was a barrier. So it was mentioned in the previous session here this morning that a digital divide obviously exists if 80% of students are reporting this. They did identify, though, that the useful supports there were internet-based tutorials and help from peers. The likelihood of sharing an e-portfolio with employers, the researchers were surprised really with this finding, that the majority are extremely unlikely or unlikely to share their e-portfolios with employers. And many of the academics would possibly have anticipated that this would not have been the case. So just to conclude, it's my colleague Tom Farley put this together. I like the statement: simply presenting e-portfolios as a self-evident good and hoping that the situation will resolve itself is short-sighted and is likely to end in frustration and missed opportunities. So there is work to be done, which is evident from our research. The experiences of receiving training and guidance from the HEI and educators, it varied across the student experience. There's a lack of common e-portfolio implementation, which was evident as well. Consideration of the challenges the process brings to students, such as demands on time, obviously needs to be observed. And also relevant resources such as video support would enhance the learning experience. And then just to give us a little bit of a plug here, we have been published. So our paper should be in the Journal of Educators Online. Now we've been told it's January 24. So they're really planning ahead, but hopefully it might appear before then. So I will circulate it to members of NTutor and to those far and wide once it's up online. So thank you very much for your time. I don't know if we have time for questions, but
We have time for one.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Of course, it's important that we capture the questions using the microphone. And I might invite our next speakers to perhaps come up and get the presentation up. Would anybody like to ask a question? Ryan?
Given the difficulties with a portfolio, what would you say are the perceived benefits that people might think would be there over just giving students on placement a series of assignments?
It would have to be the reflection, I would feel, the opportunity for them to learn through reflection and to share it. And also there is evidence of peer-to-peer learning and exchange of experiences. So
could that not be done with a set of assignments as well, that same objective?
Yes, okay, that is fair enough. But when it's inbuilt online, I suppose it also gives the opportunity of expressing their reflection through various artifacts. So a lot of assignments maybe would be in essay format, whereas this would give the opportunity to capture perspectives and experiences via video and various other technologies.
No, it just occurs to me like the students are well used to submitting electronic files and even numbers of electronic files for projects through their virtual learning environment, and asking them to use maybe another platform that isn't necessary, that's somewhat more sophisticated and maybe a bit more complex, does cause that problem they have with their time. Maybe the benefits aren't there. That's just an observation.
Okay, thank you.
Lovely. So good morning, everyone, or almost afternoon, everyone. So my name is Aisling Crowley, and this here is Cormac Quigley.
And we are lecturers in the School of Science and Computing. In this case, we're chemistry lecturers for today. So
Yes.
I'll let Aisling start, and then.
Yeah, perfect. So today we're going to talk to you about the award that we received in November last year. So this was the Disciplinary Excellence in Learning, Teaching and Assessment Award from the National Forum, also known as the Delta Award. So for those of you who might not know, the Delta Award acknowledges previous achievement and future commitment to enhancing the teaching and learning experience. So the application itself is actually quite a hefty undertaking, and it cannot be completed without a committed team. So shown here is some of the team at the HEA where we received the award, but many more actually helped us get there. So I suppose just before we get into the meat of the presentation, I'd like to introduce you to some of the others.
My name is Cormac, and I am a chemistry lecturer in the School of Science at GMIT, and I have a strong interest in bringing technology into chemistry teaching practice to enhance the experience for students and lecturers.
So I love Seamus's intro there and Cormac's long flowing hair. But we also have some other members just to quickly mention. So we have Judith, John, Philip, Siobhan and Moira. So we do have a really committed team that really helped us get there. We were also fortunate enough to be awarded some of the saddle funding that became available last year that allowed us to allocate time towards this project, because again, it is a hefty undertaking. So for those of you who don't know about first year labs, we have about 300 students that come through our doors every year, and they have the opportunity to go through or go towards 8 destination programs, which you can see. They come into us for about 2 hours every week, and we have them for the full year. In terms of the Delta Award, okay, so part of it is that you do develop a 3-year plan, so what you hope to achieve within those 3 years following their framework. And I suppose what we found when we obviously were going and looking at our plan, and when the call for this conference came up, we found that the 4 topics that are being discussed today actually do fall in line with some of the tasks that we decided to undertake. So our presentation today is really an overview of those 4 topics and what we've been contributing towards them. I suppose so. Time is ticking, so we'll get going into some of those. So obviously one of the topics being covered today is embracing sustainable development goals. And in terms of academia, we can go very broad with this. You can look at our surrounding community, which is quite broad now, considering we have Galway, Sligo and Letterkenny. We can focus on the campus, or we could get down to the nitty-gritty between courses and modules. And I have my chemistry hat on at the moment. The way that I like to think about it is that I would like to help our students become sustainability literate and conscious scientists. So we provide them with the skills that they need when they graduate and they go out into the workplace and industry. They can contribute to these SDGs and they can help make the world a better place, essentially. When we're talking about chemistry, when we're talking about green chemistry, these are the SDGs that we believe that we align with and we can contribute positively to. So in terms of our first year labs and what we are aiming to achieve, we are fortunate in some regards that the Delta Award aligned with the timeframe of programmatic review. And this allowed us to implement some changes in the LIS module. Okay, so first years, we're actually able to get an introduction to green chemistry. So having a good foundation of understanding of what it is and how it benefits them. We also wanted to make tangible changes in the labs themselves. So we started to revise our experiments and we looked at something simple as reducing volumes. Okay, so this actually falls in line with one of the 12 principles of green analytical chemistry. We began revising our lab manuals and we wanted to see, okay, can we simple rephrasing? Instead of saying weigh out 5 grams into something, students automatically go for a weigh out. Can we say weigh directly into a glass beaker, eliminating that plastic waste? Can we specify use 1 plastic cuvette versus use 1 per sample? Okay, so again, eliminating that plastic waste. We also want to introduce new experiments with waterless condensers, replacing the Liebeck condensers, which can use between 0.5 and 1 litre of water per minute. And we all know a reaction lasts far longer than a minute, and depending on the amount of students you have and how keen they are to turn that tap, they can generate quite a lot of water waste. And then finally, what we want to do is continue the ongoing replacement of carcinogenic and mutagenic reagents in our labs with safer alternatives. So this is just, I suppose, some of them that we have identified in the immediate, in the present, but this will continue and develop as we move forward. So I'll pass you over to Cormac now to talk about some of our students as partners in teaching and learning activities.
So yeah, another big part of what we do and part of the Delta Award is getting the student voice in. And anybody who's seen me talk before knows that I have maybe interesting, slightly controversial views on listening to students. But we really do try and incorporate students as partners in developing the lab. So one project that was taken on by Aisling and some other members of the team in collaboration with the other first year science groups was funded internally by a pirate call, was taking microbits, which are small programmable computers, and actually designing an instrument for a lab. So the lab that we chose was a conductivity experiment measuring the conductivity of solutions. But where the student came in was that there was a student research assistant hired for a summer project, and they actually developed the apparatus, looked at, what kind of coding can we do? How can that measurement work? How can the lab work? And then how does that replace what's there at the moment, meet the same learning objectives, but also get the students code literate? That's another, there's so many different things that we're asked to do. And another thing is having students conscious of coding and computing. And so you kind of achieved all that while also getting, students as the central driver of that change of how would that lab work? What did the students actually want to see in it? So that was one aspect of it. The other students as partners are our postgraduate students. So postgraduate students are a key part in both delivering and developing our first year labs. There's 4 undergraduate demonstrators. Now there's 20 odd labs a week, so they deliver less than a quarter of the labs. But it's still really important for us that the labs that are delivered by the postgraduate students are at a level that the labs that are delivered by lecturers. And I know that's certainly something that's, the OECD report is coming, and it's something that's controversial. But from our perspective as a team, in order to maximize the postgraduate students, there's been a lot of work by different team members in creating a set of tools that allows the postgraduate students to have what they need to have in order to deliver the best lab. So in terms of practice run materials, sample answers, all that kind of material has been set up. The other place where we have students as partners is our learning analytics postgrad. So you can see on the right hand side there, short hair again, myself, Ike, Auntie, and Dr. Attain Kiley. That's Ike has just won a prize for responsible AI from Data IQ. So that was an international competition, and he was very impressive, beat out some very stiff competition to win that prize. But they work on the learning analytics end of things. And so part of my students as partners is that I think it really has to be data driven. You can't just ask students what they think, because any given day students, the loudest voice will come to the top and they will tell you what they feel like. And that might depend on whether they had their coffee in the morning or not as to how grumpy they are. Whereas if you can do data-driven development, then you can actually, I think, bring much more measurable and practical improvements to your work. But I'll hand back to Aisling now.
So I suppose leading on from that data, so in semester 1, Judith and Sarah, who you met previously, they were actually undertaking, I suppose, some maintenance review of our Moodle page, and they came across a trend through the analytics present. And they actually found that in semester 1, probably around weeks 5 or 6, there was a decline in engagement and a decline in the students' grades. And obviously this is something we don't want to see. Now Sarah is currently undertaking her Masters in Teaching and Learning and has decided to make this the focus of her thesis. So Sarah has her issue clearly identified from the data analytics, and Sarah now wants to reach out to her students and clarify what's going on. So Sarah is currently developing a feedback form here that we can share with our students and find out exactly what is going on from their point of view, what is going on, what is the issue. We have our ideas, but we need to confirm that. We need to see if that's the case. So again, we'll have the data available to us. Okay, so we'll have that, and Sarah also wants to go and open up to focus groups as well, so we can have a face-to-face conversation with the students. So this is just, I suppose, another example of how we are suppose, making sure that our students do have a voice within these first year labs.
So the other aspect, or another aspect of what we do, is this idea of, digital transformation. And over the last 5 or 6 years, again, we've had things like the Lightboard and other developments. But this is currently our first year Moodle page. You can see all those lovely AI generated pictures. But more importantly than that, and bringing AI into how I designed the course, we have and continue to develop new and interesting assessment approaches, assessment types, which we'll talk about in a bit. And the students engage every week. They have online work to do. So the digital transformation is constant and ongoing, and looking to merge the lab experience with the online experience so that it's a complete experience. Some of that has been basic fundamental things, like actually when you get the Delta Award, they ask you to set out what you want to do and have a plan. And part of our plan is, well, we just want to improve things. Nothing too exciting. I would say this is nothing too exciting, but if you can get your team together and get going on it, then you can really improve the student experience. And all that's going on here is, rather than the question telling you yes or no, well, you've got 600 questions. Now we've improved our feedback to give students specific and directed feedback to send them where they need to go based on what wrong answers they go in. And the level of complexity that you can put in that is basically limitless, but we've been able to put some time in, and the students get reasonably good individual feedback on each question, the personalized feedback. And it's just a matter of the more time you have, the better you can make that, the more tailored you can make it to a specific student. But it's something that we're really working on as a team. Do you want to talk about this? Or no, I'll keep going. The other aspects are just, continuing to bring in things like H5P, looking at how the students actually engage with different things. In the past, it was clunky. The students, well, maybe not clunky, but students watch a video. The students then do a quiz. And if we integrate all of that, can we actually see those benefits? Do we get increased video watching? Do we get increased participation in the quiz? Is it better because they only have one thing to click on and then go through it? Or does it make students sit there and watch video where they don't want to watch the video? And so all of these improvements, they're all analytics observed and analytics driven, but it's that constant improvement. It's like, we have this, but can we do better? And that's kind of what the award, or part of what the award has done for us. Also, as part of the award, it's actually given us an impetus to apply for other things. So we, back last December, I don't know if anybody saw the QQI anniversary fund call, but we got funded to run a project. And what we're investigating now is actually looking at how our assessment techniques that we're using in first year, how they can be adapted to other levels. So, I could give you an hour-long presentation on just this kind of thing, but based on the analytics, we can generate lab-based questions that allow us to analyze the physical data that's coming out of the lab. What numbers are they getting and why are they getting? And you can see just one of our before this study findings is that you can actually see that on the left-hand side of those two bar charts, on the left-hand side, the students are basically random number generators the first time they do a titration. But by week 3 or 4 of doing a titration, you get a normal distribution, which is exactly what you'd expect from a good analytical lab. It should be a normal distribution. Now, the width of that distribution, we can argue about, but it shows that our teaching is working. And if we can take that kind of learning analytics, we can say, well, do we need more titrations or do we need fewer titrations? At what point do they actually have the technique down? So that's another aspect of investigation that we're kind of going forward with. Keeping on the themes of the conference, AI is on everybody's minds. So there's two aspects to this. One is above the line there, which is we have 2 postgraduate students who are all about AI and machine learning. And we are really trying to leverage that in order to be able to improve the offering for the students, to figure out what do the students want and what do they need. And again, you could talk for an hour about the issues with AI, but you can see on the right-hand side, here's just a couple of things. These are actually taken from a poster that's being presented down in Kerry right now at the CASI statistical conference. But using things like K-means, which is a machine learning technique to group the students into definitely passing, maybe could use a bit of attention, need an intervention, allows us within 5 or 6 weeks of student interaction with the module to see what students are really in need of help in a way that, if you look at all of the different things that they interact with, there's so many different things, but if you look at what actually correlates with their success, you can do that through machine learning led modeling. The other part of that, which goes back to what I was talking on the last slide, is about creating assessment that's robust to AI. And for us, and I know we're running out of time, part of that is if we can link their physical data in the lab to the things that the lab demonstrators look at every week to what they're putting in online, it takes away a layer of, well, I can just get the AI to do it for me anyway. Or if it's the case that the AI can just do it anyway, well, then it's part of the tools that the students use to complete the lab, and then we can integrate that into their learning. But all the time their learning is linked back to the physical, what they're doing in the lab. And so it creates a integrated sense of this is what I'm learning to do.
We'll fly through these fairly sharpish, but just, I suppose, to summarise some of the project outputs to date. So Cormac mentioned previously that particularly for postgrads that do assist us in demonstrating, we feel it's really important that they have a toolkit to help them. So what we have designed now is just, I suppose, a manual with sample answers and sample data to give them a rough idea of where they should be in the lab. We've also generated a lecturer's handbook, which gives them key safety data or key safety tips. We are in a chemistry lab after all, but also just to acknowledge things that we've kind of come across from our own experience. So particularly if there's a particular calculation that we know students struggle with, spend a bit more time on that. So we have them for every single lab throughout the semester. As we've said, we've also generated feedback for over 600 Moodle questions, and we also have 8 new H5P videos created, with more coming in the future. Cormac, you have one of these guys?
Yeah, so again, we've just been doing lots of dissemination. There's posters and that kind of thing. Not too much to say on that slide. What's next? Well, lots of different things planned. Short-term goals, medium goals, and long-term goals. Not going to get into them other than to say that the Delta Award, if you have a team, is a really great way of focusing in the mind of what actually do we want to achieve. And it's a really great way of involving other people, because I've been working on this stuff for 9 years now, as it turns out. And for a lot of those years, I was just plowing ahead on my own, trying to do stuff just by myself. And as soon as you start to bring in other people, it's not a zero-sum game. And there's so much stuff to be done there that people come into the team and they get a lot out of working together. And you get a lot out because it means that things happen that otherwise we're just always on the long finger. You know, so I think I would encourage anybody who's thinking, oh, should I try and get my team together and go for this? I'd say, yes, do. As you do.
Thank you.
I don't think we have time for follow-up questions, but I'm sure you're going to be around for a little while if anybody in the building would like to catch up with you at lunchtime. That's lovely. Brilliant. Or people online might be able to reach out to you.
Just to say thank you to Karina and the Teaching and Learning Office as well, because the Saddle funding has been really instrumental, and they have been very supportive of our work, which has led us to be able to get other funding and keep on going from there. So
I think a fabulous, I mean, just the range of activities up there that you've been talking about, it really demonstrates, I suppose, the power of working together as a team, which is exactly what the Delta Award was put together to try and support. So well done, guys. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Cheers. And I'm now going to hand over to Kevin, who's going to manage the next part of the proceedings.
Perfect. Okay, so this next presentation is from Dr. Sinead Loughran and Dr. Bridget Kelly. And I won't do much more introduction, and I'll let you go ahead and present your presentation. So if Sinead or Bridget, whoever is starting off there, you can start away.
Okay, thanks very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today to hear about how we've been using virtual labs to transform practical teaching, and share some of our findings from this multi-institutional project, the Virtual Labs project. So I'm Sinead Loughran, and together with my colleague, Dr. Bridget Kelly, we're going to tell you about the Virtual Lab project on behalf of this larger team across multiple institutions. And Bridget and I are part of the DKIT academic project team. And we're joined by Ronan Bree, Ben Drum and Keevan Griffin, and also as well as departmental and school management and student partners on this project. And today we're going to give you an overview of the Virtual Labs project. We'll have a look at some of our aims and objectives, some of the preliminary findings we've had from our research, and we'll close out just looking at the impact of the project overall. So the connected cogs, or the moving gears that you see here, they really epitomise the partnership approach on this project. And we see represented here, there are 5 higher education partners. And we have a group here of national enterprise partners, a group of local enterprise partners local to us in DKIT, our EdTech partners, including Labster. And together with our student partners, this is a group of our student advisory group here, who are pictured here. I suppose all together we're driving forward progress on this particular project. So the project is funded through the Human Capital Initiative Pillar 3 on innovation and agility. And it was a pre-COVID application funded to the tune of almost €3 million across the breadth of the partners on the project. There are 5 academic partners, and Maynooth is the lead institute on this project. And it is enterprise and EdTech partner focused, student-centred, and concerned with the development of transversal skills. And the aim of the project really is to future-proof graduates and ensure that there's a greater focus on promoting and embedding transversal skills. And we're doing this through the use of these innovative methods so that our learners will benefit from improved quality and more engaging ways of learning on enterprise-focused courses. And it was noted by Minister Simon Harris on his comments on the HCI project, but specifically on this Virtual Labs project, that these projects will develop and change teaching and learning. The global pandemic has reinforced the need for us all to be agile and diverse, and crucially, though, it requires us to develop new skills and equip the next generation with the critical importance to the economy and the workplace of the future. So I'm going to pass over to my colleague Bridget, who's going to give you an update on the progress on the project to date.
So the project is at its midpoint, and so far we've rolled it out to 2,500 students across the whole higher education institute, all of the different ones. And it's ranging from students from first year all the way up to master's students. We have 75 staff at the moment contributing to the initiative, and that's staff ranging from academic, technical officers, project managers, demonstrators, and educational support. We've integrated the virtual labs into more than 25 different programs: general chemistry, pharmaceutical biochemistry, and lots of different other ones. We've got 5 educational technology partners. So far, at the midpoint, we conducted 26 students and staff focus groups, meetings and surveys. There's been 7 industry meeting and events that have run. There's been 17 presentations at different conferences, national, international, and showcases and events. And then the Virtual Labs website, social media channels, and brand identity has been developed and launched since the midpoint as well. So in DKIT, the Virtual Labs project has engaged with a number of different programs, and it's mainly around the bio space because we are kind of more bio than chemistry. So the DKIT programs, general science, biopharmaceutical science, environmental science, pharmaceutical science, bioscience, health and physical activity, and agriculture, so a whole range of different programs. And then a whole range of different modules, as you see here, so from chemistry to environmental chemistry to molecular biology. And these are all modules that are first year modules ranging all the way up to master's level modules. So last year we had 182 licenses for students, and it's gone up to 247 licenses this year. And at the moment, we have 10 academic staff that are actually involved in the project. So the potential for the virtual lab simulations is to enhance students' learning experience, to increase their learning, and to be able to enhance their employability and transversal skill development. So one of our colleagues who's part of the team, Ben, produced this video which gives an overview of how we use virtual labs at DKIT.
Labs project at the Talk Institute of Technology, funded through the HCI initiative. Here at DKIT, we're using the Labster simulation package software. Labster
Is it stop playing?
Across a range of scientific disciplines, from chemistry to anatomy and physiology to biotechnology and the environmental sciences. At DigitalEd, we're focused on the practical aspects of laboratory teaching. If we examine a typical third-year laboratory manual, for example, you'll see that our students learn a range of practical skills throughout a single 12 to 14-week semester. We can use the virtual labs that Labster provides to enhance and complement some of the more detailed techniques that we want our students to learn. We can embed Labster simulations into our virtual learning environment Moodle, where students can easily access it along with their regular lecture materials. By simply scrolling onto their Moodle page, they can access Labster simulations, which, through the process of a simple click, take the students to a virtual learning space where they can press a play button and be taken into a virtual world where they're okay to fail, where they're safe to make mistakes, and where they can learn new techniques in a matter of minutes that might take several weeks or even months. By using Labster simulations, for example, in this simulation on ion exchange chromatography, we can allow students to complete the simulation either before they come into the face-to-face lab or just after. Therefore, we can prime students for an experiment that they're going to learn face-to-face, or the simulation can be used afterwards to reinforce what they've learned in the face-to-face practical setting. As well as learning practical skills, they can use a virtual iPad to learn theory and interact with other digital skills within the virtual environment to learn about data analysis and interpretation. We've also found that we can use virtual labs in other new ways. In this experiment, we're looking at carbohydrates and the biochemistry of other biomolecules. This is a class of students in our health and physical activity program in first year. These students normally have no practical laboratory element in their modules, but by using the Labster simulations, we're able to give them an opportunity to interact with a virtual learning space in a way that wasn't possible. So here you can see students are performing simulations at their own pace, they're learning together, and through little interactions in the class, what would have been taught previously purely by lectures, now students are doing on their own, and interacting with each other and having fun in ways that wasn't possible.
So you can see from the video, Ben's video, that the virtual labs have a fit in a number of different ways. So they fit as a pre-lab exercise where students can do a virtual lab before they do a lab. They fit as a post-lab exercise where students can revise or reinforce their knowledge that they learned in the practical. And they can also be used instead of a particular practical in case we don't have the equipment, for example.
So we've been busy looking at the student perceptions. The primary objective of the research component of this project is to establish student perceptions of the virtual labs and the virtual lab resources. So to that end, we've conducted surveys in November 21 and again in November 22 to find out what are the current student perceptions of virtual labs through our surveys. And alongside that, we've also conducted student focus groups in April 2022 to explore how and why students have these perspectives on virtual labs. So just to share some of our preliminary findings on this, we've had, through our student surveys, we've had a really good response rate with 176 responses, and this is local to DigitalEd across second, third and fourth year students. And when we asked them what part of practical work do you find most beneficial in your learning, they very strongly came back to say that that was experimental work. And when we asked them which of the following statements best reflects how virtual labs can be used for experimental work, remembering that these students would have had some experience of virtual labs during the COVID lockdowns, they came back to say resoundingly that they are useful to complement experimental work and not completely replace it. Some of these opinions were echoed through our student focus groups, and students reported that face-to-face practicals were much preferred, but the virtual labs offered opportunities to see resources and techniques that would not normally be available. However, the importance wasn't emphasised enough, so that at some points they were seen as a job on the to-do list rather than as very important. Students also reported that they were able to repeat or review as much as they wanted, being able to try things many times. And one student mentioned deliberately making errors to see what would happen in the simulation, and they learned a lot from that. But some found it hard to engage with the virtual labs and just got through them. So aside from this research, we also have our DKIT staff focus groups, which we've conducted, and we're in the process of rolling out a graduate survey to assess perspectives from our students who would have experienced the Virtual Labs project and are now graduate.
So as part of the project, we've also run some enterprise and student events. Back in February, we ran an enterprise partner workshop where we had representatives from our enterprise partners and our student advisory group come together, and ourselves, to go through how we use the virtual labs in the different modules, and what basically to find out what industry thought and whether they thought it was useful. And it was a resounding kind of positive from that experience. And then we also ran a career paths in science event in association with the Department of Life and Health Science at the college. And we had a range of different speakers, some past graduates from DKI2 who now work in industry. So graduates from Norbrook, from Almac, from Wuji and Bristol Myers Squibb. We also had some lecturers who were past students of DKIT, and they gave an account of their career journey so far. And then we also had the head of careers and employability give an overview of the different things that are important for industry or for employment, and the virtual labs kind of definitely filled a gap in that in that day. So then this is a slide with all the feedback from the whole project. And you can see there's a load of different comments, but the ones we just wanted to draw your attention to, that the students felt that the virtual labs have a real world application, that they are relevant to real world scenarios. They felt that it was important that they could repeat the simulations numerous times. And we found that ourselves with our own DKIT student focus groups. They found that teamwork was real positive with using the virtual labs. They found that it was a safe space to fail, because again, they could repeat the simulations numerous times, and if they failed, it didn't really matter because they could repeat it. And then that learning could be brought through to the actual live practicals. And then it was found that it was helpful for first years missing a science subject, in that it was confidence building again, that they could repeat the experiments in virtual labs and that they could build their confidence.
So also across the breadth of the project then, this is a collection of some of the enterprise feedback, which we found was echoed through our own events that Bridget mentioned there in DKIT. So enterprise felt that the virtual labs provide a solid foundation for the next level of training, that they can bridge the gap from the education environment to industry, that they can represent real world scenarios. The environment is also potentially helpful for building team skills, as well as addressing problem solving in particular applications. So just to close out and just on the presentation, I suppose the Virtual Labs project represents an impactful example of multiple stakeholders working in partnership to positively transform and enhance science practical teaching and learning through technology. The research that we've conducted has shown that virtual labs work best to complement and not replace practical labs. Some of the drawbacks highlighted relate to accessibility, discrepancies in assessment strategy, and also the possibility that students are overloaded if there are a lot of virtual lab resources being used across programs. And also our research shows that the use of virtual labs supports transversal skill development and provides real world scenarios and a safe space to fail. So for us at DKIT, we're going to continue with our rollout with our partners across the project, continue to research and look at perspectives and build on what we've learned so far. So just to finish, we'd like to just acknowledge our other team members in DKIT, Ronan, Ben and Kevin, our school management, Ariane and Edel, as well as our student partners on the student advisory panel, our CELT support, as well as our national partners through Maynooth and the other institutes, our local enterprise partners, which are all represented here. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Sinead and Bridget there. I know we probably have another presentation, from Cleena, who might get ready in the background. And I know there's definitely one question online, unless there's maybe some in the room as well. But one question that came in online there, Bridget and Sinead, is, have you faced any issues with the lack of availability of relevant practicals in particular subject areas through the Labster platform itself?
Yeah, that can definitely be a limitation for the particular platform. Yeah, there's a suite of lab resources that are developed on and available on the Labster platform, and you scour that suite to see if there's anything appropriate. And that would be one piece of feedback, I suppose, from a staff point of view, that there may be particular resources that are suitable for maybe first year and second year students, and if they're being used at first year and second year level, then it would be nice to have an additional resource that maybe was more advanced in the same area for the third and fourth year students, for example. I know for me in particular, I teach analytical science. There's a HPLC resource that I use in second year, but again, I teach HPLC in later years, and therefore there isn't an element available to me without reusing that particular element. So yeah, that can be an issue.
Thank you for that. Is there any questions in the room? Yeah. Will I do the rugby?
That was a really interesting talk. Thanks. I was just wondering if you would have done any comparisons with other pre and post lab materials. So say like, a comparison with videos, or would you have run any analytics to see, is it actually impacting students, or do they just say that it's nice? That's not a really hard question, but I'm mad for analytics.
So I suppose the Virtual Labs project, it does actually encompass elements like the pre-practical videos as well. So they would actually be elements that fall under the remit of the Virtual Labs project. So a lot of us are using, for example, specific videos. If we haven't got a Labster resource, we might create a specific video that would be tailored to our own particular lab session and use that as a pre-practical, maybe to replace a pre-practical talk, for example. So those elements are also, I suppose we are looking at those as part of the research that we're doing, but we're not directly comparing the effectiveness of one particular element over a Labster element, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks. Okay. Thanks very much, folks. And thanks for answering those questions as well. Just in the interest of time, I think we'll probably just go on to the next presentation. And if you do have any questions for Sinead or Bridget, please feel free to contact them via email. So next up, we have Cleena Flood from IADT, and I'll just let Cleena share her presentation and get started as soon as you are ready.
So thank you very much for waiting for me. My name is Cleona and I'm from IADT. And my topic today is I'm going to be discussing what I'm doing on my PhD studies with Lancaster University. My supervisor is Dr. Natasha Lakovic, and Natasha is an expert in the area of semiotics and has worked extensively in images in education. My research is looking at how lecturers and students use and perceive images in presentation technologies such as PowerPoint in teaching and learning. It's a large project, and I would like to show you some of the transferable findings that you may find useful for your own teaching practice. I've always been interested in using images to teach. When I started my teaching career, I mainly used them decoratively, even humorously, and in a manner that I hoped would keep students engaged and interested. Having done my undergraduate degree with the Open University and having a background in training adult leaders in a youth organisation, I hadn't any hard and fast rules as to what a lecture looked like. So I was very flexible on my presentation approaches. With experience, I tried to use images more effectively and started to consider them as a tool to teach and added them to my academic toolbox. I would like to share this with you, this research with you, and hopefully look at what the students have told me, because it's mainly the students' focus that I'll be looking at today. So just to give you an overview, are images actually helping us to teach our students to learn and helping us to teach? And I had a concern that images are being used to teach and learn online and in the face-to-face spaces with image literate students, and are we taking advantage of this? So how I went about the study was I did interviews with students and lecturers, and I had an intervention and then a follow-up survey. And the research question that I posed for the research for the students was basically, how do students perceive the use of presentation technologies and images as useful for their own learning? And hopefully I will be able to make a contribution to the teaching and learning and the TEL literature. But basically, I would like to make a contribution to how we teach better. So the inspiration for the research came when one of the lecture rooms were refurbished in the college. And I was personally challenged by this new setup. There was 2 very large double screens. And when I was sitting there in meetings, I didn't know quite where to look at. So I was wondering what was happening, and were students having similar difficulties. So that I knew that there was a different perceptual cognitive process going on, and I just didn't know where to look at. So I was confused. And with my background in psychology, I wonder how the classroom setup would support the comprehension of the class content that was being presented to students. And would one screen be better than 2 screens, or would 2 screens, were they too distracting, and how would they help? So the idea for the thesis was born. Now, I didn't use the screens as part of the technology, but I used the content that we were using in the screens to deliver information to the students. So today's students are really different from the students that I started to teach 15 years ago. And many of the lecturers are, they come from an era when they didn't have PowerPoint when they were being taught. So they're teaching in a radically different way to how they were taught themselves. So most students today are digitally literate, and they have experienced online learning, particularly through COVID. Doesn't mean to say they're experts, but they have experience of it. But students are also image literate, and they use social media the use of social media has encouraged this image literacy, and simply by being exposed to images has improved this literacy. They are using images which are engaging, it grabs their attention, it imparts information, and it tells a story really quickly. And they get all this before they scroll on to the next Instagram feed. So why aren't we using images more? If they engage students to learn, why can't we use images in our teaching in order to keep their attention, to help them to remember and to support their learning? Some of the advantage that I found is that images support cognitive processes. The importance of getting the right images is absolutely critical. Relevance to the topic is vital. Otherwise, students will be pondering on an image about what was that all about and miss the actual learning point. So it's important to get the balance right. There are lots of things to consider when using images. the quality of the image, the source of the image, are there copyright issues around it? And the type of image used is also important. Could an image be misconstrued by a student? Could it distress them? Could it cause confusion, or could it cause something negative for the student? So although a picture paints 1,000 words, which is a quote that a lot of my participants used, a picture needs to be appropriate to the topic and to the situation. And when we consider how images are used through the educational system, we find that by the time the students reach third level, they may have been exposed to lots of images in primary school and prior to that in secondary school, but by the time they reached third level, there may not be any images at all in their textbooks. So when we start off with the early use, images are used to help build relationships, help development of language, and it's actually starting young children to read, because they're actually reading the images in a slightly different way to what we read text. So the situation here is image over text. And then when we go to schools, the text is still fun, the images are still there, and children are enjoying them. There's less images used as they progress through school. So although it's still text over image, there's less images coming in and there's more text. And finally, when we get to college life, well, the whole thing can change radically. But it does depend on the discipline. There are some targeted images used, such as diagrams, models, and tables, and this is all perfectly fine. But mainly text, and we're talking now about the textbook. So this is mainly in text, and this can transfer then into our presentations. So the situation is text over image, or it's very logo-centric. So we are extraordinarily dependent on technology. This is not to argue that face-to-face practice-based teaching should be avoided. Absolutely not. Our challenge is to engage with technology and to use it to the best of our abilities in order to enhance our teaching and learning. Digital software is a fact of life today. We move seamlessly through the different platforms, different medias, and different presentation technologies as we go through our classes. However, there's a lack of studies conducted in this area, and Halliwell and Lakovic 2007, they had a paper which talked about the lack of engagement with images and the students with the engagement of the images in their presentations. And so far, nothing has been done to link threshold concepts and critical thinking with images. And also the other gap that I have found is that students haven't actually been asked what the impact is on their learning. The research questions that I will be looking at is what our lecturers and students reported uses and experience of images in their digital presentations. And we'll be looking today at the students. So the students' research question was, how do students perceive the use of presentation technologies and images as a learning tool in the online and face-to-face classroom, and also to look at the challenges and the benefits that they are getting from these images. So just an overview of the methodology and the design. I used interviews with students and lecturers. I had 20 students in each 20 students and 20 lecturers. These were all done online because they were done over the COVID period. We then, after COVID, we got a little bit loosened up. I was able to prepare an intervention with lecturers. Students were invited, and Natasha, my supervisor, ran this. She ran it in the college. It was an online intervention. We did follow-up surveys for feedback on the intervention, and then a number of lecturers volunteered to take part in implementing some of the suggestions that she made in her intervention. So I followed that up as well. And then I reckoned that there was a gap in the research methodology in that not everybody enjoys using images or likes images. So I did a follow-up survey with lecturers and students as to just asking mainly the same questions, and we got a response from that. The analysis was a reflexive thematic analysis, as qualitative research, and that is being used to analyse the data, and this is all based on Brown and Clark's RTA. So the theoretical framework is that we are combining threshold concepts, critical thinking, and digital images in presentation technologies. And you could ask, well, why are you bringing these three things together? Well, threshold concepts are specific to the disciplines that we're teaching, whether it's chemistry or whether it's English, literature, it can be anything. We're guiding students into a particular profession and a particular way of working. So giving a profession an analogy, becoming a psychologist, a teacher, a filmmaker, you have to go through a process of change about your own self-image and your own self-identity in order to become that something else. And Myers and Land argue that threshold concepts are troublesome, they're transformative and irreversible. And then critical thinking is one of the expectations that an employer expects from a graduate student. So when I started to look at the digital images, that's students and lecturers presented in their interviews, I took a very wide definition of it, and that definition was really led by the students. Other research have looked at just photographs. That's what Natasha and Maddie looked at, was just photographs, whereas I looked at the complete spectrum and let the participants define what they thought was an image. So we looked at photographs, we looked at stock photos, partial images, and line drawings and graphs, etc. Linking all of this to the presentation technologies, the tools that people were using, they were using things like Canva, mainly PowerPoint, but also Prezi and the Apple Mac presentations as well. And Tufte 20 years ago said that PowerPoint was a very pushy, speaker-orientated piece of software. It was designed for commercial use originally, rather than educational use, and it minimizes information. So it boils things down to the absolute essence of what you want. And within teaching, it can be conducive to control, possibly can be used as a snooze button, which is not necessarily the right thing, but it also can lead to passive learning. Roberts talked about engagement with multimedia, and he talked about images, and he used quite extraordinary images in his teaching, but he said that these are learning tools that produces much better student outcomes. So there are some things that we need to look at as the use of images. So there's big pluses, and there are opportunities for students to engage with their content. It supports cognitive processes. It can illustrate a point. It can tell a story. Students like them, and coming from the research, they really do like them if they're used appropriately. It's a break from text. They find the big walls of text are really problematic, and it's using multimodalities, which really helps their learning. On a slightly smaller note, it helps with student focus. It helps them to zone in rather than zone out. And it offers variety in a PowerPoint presentation or in our class. It also helps students with different learning abilities. We all have slightly different ways of learning, and this can be captured with using an image in a classroom to investigate a topic. But it also captures the students who have disabilities such as dyslexia, who find walls of text really difficult, and it really can help them get the essence of what is being talked about, and then they can learn. Images can be informative, and it taps in to the image literacy of our students. On a lesser note, on some of the drawbacks that we need to be concerned about is they can be overused, they can be misunderstood, and we do have to take into account students who have sight difficulties and find ways around that. We do need to include appropriate images and take into account copyright, and the use of stock images are useful. Some of the students didn't like those. They felt that they were just popped in there into a PowerPoint presentation to make it look pretty. But it also takes time to find relevant images. And that was one of the disadvantages that some of the lecturers highlighted. So from the students' experience, these are the results from just the student surveys of the students who didn't take part in the interviews, and these are some of their insights. It supported their general cognitive support. they were their learning was enhanced and their understanding and their engagement was improved. They felt that they were building their knowledge by using multimodalities and by the use of images. They felt that an image paints 1,000 words, which lessens the need for a lot of language and a lot of text. And they felt that there was a lot of image over text, which was really useful for them. So they also said that images can help and they can hinder, but they mainly came out on the side of images helping. So students also they also talked about their experience of their lived experience of images. And because they're using images all of the time and their social media and how they engage with each other, they felt that images were useful in their assessment as well. And it was connecting them to the real life topics and the reality that they were living in. Some of the things that the students said, and I won't read all of them, is that it's nice to see images because the slides look more organized and not scary compared to when it's just text alone, which I thought that was kind of an insightful comment by one of the students, that the word scary was really insightful. So how can we use images to improve our teaching? So one method that you're probably using a method yourselves anyway, but Natasha Lakovic has actually put together a nice inquiry graphic method. And an inquiry graphic method is very different to an infographic method, because an infographic speeds up information, whereas inquiry graphic slows it down, and it helps you engage, it helps you think about it. So she sets this out as part of the learning in a class. So she will take an image and she will look at the learning objectives, and then she will have a number of questions that she can ask around a particular image, or get groups to discuss about the different image. And it's the who, what, whys, the where, when was it taken, those type of questions, in order to engage the student with what's going on inside in the image and engage in the actual concepts that are relative to their class. You don't necessarily need to use all of these, but you can use quite a lot of them. So basically this method is slowing down, it opens up discussion, and it's a space to explore concepts. So by engaging students with their current knowledge, it's asking them to find an academic and formal definitions and finding images to usefully use in discussions. And the way I have used this is I've used this with Padlets. I've got students to come up with the concept that I was exploring in a Padlet was that of conformity. I got them to type into the Padlet their initial understanding of conformity, then go find a definition of it from a formal source, then find images. We discuss that as a class, and then go into some of the formal teaching on it. And in this case, it was Milgram and his experiments on conformity, and then get them to discuss it again, go back and re-find new definitions and re-find new images. And then we have a PDF that can be made from the Padlet, which can work as their notes for the class. So in summary, how do we use images and how can we use them? Well, there's lots of different ways of using them. There's lots of different software such as Padlets and Miro. There's lots of different free images out there such as unsplash.com, and this is where the images for this presentation came from, along with the images from Microsoft Word. Do be aware of copyright, and you by all means use your own images, but don't overuse the exercise, because then it starts to lose its impact. Too many images in any presentation can lead to overkill, and that's that side of things. And it's important that the images are appropriate, and be aware that images can trigger some negative issues for students. So warning signs are always needed if you're going to use something that's problematic. Most times we don't use those type of images anyway, but get students to find images and to build their own images, and most of all have fun, because teaching with images is definitely fun. And that's the end of the presentation, and I'd like to thank you all very much for listening and for your attention, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Kleena. I'll just check. Is there any questions there? I know we're a little bit tight for time, but we could probably squeeze in one if there's one. No? Okay. I think I see the next presenters online there, so you can definitely get ready. And if there is any questions, we'll try and answer them, but no questions? Okay. Thank you, Kleena. And next up, we have Sarah and John Noel, who will be presenting. And I see your screen is shared there. I'll let you introduce your presentation yourselves, and you can get started whenever you are ready. We can see your screens, so we're all good on this end.
Okay, thanks, Jack, I believe. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for giving us the opportunity to present our results and some of the work that we've carried out. I would also like to give a special shout out to the teaching and learning team for the settled funding and for all the support that we've had, in particular Sean Daffy so far. And last but not least, my thanks to Jean-Noël, who agreed to come on board with this project with me last September. So I'm a language lecturer on the Dublin Road campus at the ATU, and I lecture in French at present. And languages in Europe are taught. Tu peux partir? Ouais. We'll kind of just give you a little bit overview of the contents, but for languages, here we're going to talk about the CEFR, which is the Common European Frameworks for Reference for Languages. Ouais, tu peux passer maintenant, s'il te plaît. Ouais. And which is pretty much a European-wide document that was released first in 2001 and a second time in 2018, and that has been implemented to harmonize the teaching, learning, and assessment of languages across European countries. So the document itself was published by the Council of Europe, which is not a European institution. It's more like an institution based in Europe, but not part of the EU. And the role of the CFR of that document is to provide a descriptive framework, which is not prescriptive. So it's not telling you what not to do. It's telling you what to do, what to aim for. And it's aimed at plurilingual and pluricultural competence. So we're talking about getting individuals to speak different languages and being able to recognize what they do in the different languages, even if the levels are very different across. And because it's a descriptive approach on what people can do, it's based on an action-oriented approach on being able to communicate, to do something. So on the right-hand side, you can see that the CFR is broadly describing the language proficiency in terms of general competencies, communication language activities, and language strategies at different levels as well. Tu peux passer? Ouais. So the main issue, one of the main issues with the CFR is that it's supposed to include some cultural competence, but if you look into the actual descriptors, the culture is only ever very broadly described and only appears in, I think, 23 of the nearly 100 descriptors. So it becomes very tricky to know what to do in terms of culture in the classroom. La suivante, s'il te plaît. Ouais. And to give you a little bit of background about languages at the ATU campus, is that in my French class, I have very, very mixed levels, and I have totally different programs as well. So we are lucky enough to still have enough students that we can divide the students into, on one side, the business school, and on the other side, the hotel school for first years. So that means that for my business school, the first year class, I have a student from marketing and sales, from general business, from finance and economics, from BIS, from entrepreneurship, which are actually quite different programs. And the hotel school students, same as I end up with people from hotel management, tourism management, culinary arts, who are pretty much just doing cookery, heritage, and events. So you have a very broad spectrum of programs. And in addition, for some classes, I have a very broad spectrum of levels, with students who are total beginners, with students who have done French up to the Leaving Cert. So it creates a bit of a tension in how do I engage those students to make sure that everyone is interested and everyone is learning something. Added to that is the issue that we don't really have books that much, because if you have such different programs, you can't really use a language method per se, because who are you going to target? Are you going to target the culinary guys? Are we going to target the hotel students? Are we going to target the tourism students? So it becomes quite problematic. And lastly, a lot of the books, even though they are supposed to include an action-oriented approach about what to do, and multilingual and plurilingual and pluricultural competencies, studies, a study in particular, Trowbridge, has showed that up to the Leaving Cert, most of the books used focus on linguistic skills such as grammar, vocabulary, and the culture is not as relevant. So, So pretty much the question for me was trying to include all the abilities, all the programs, and trying to come up with something that was relevant for them. So would focusing on the culture instead of focusing on the language be a good way to engage the students and to include all abilities? And could we perhaps come up with hybrid resources to trigger interest and also to be usable by as many people as possible? So that's it for me for now. Jean-Noël, à toi.
Right, thank you, Sarah. Hello, I'm really delighted to be with you today. To introduce myself briefly, I am a transmedia producer and I work for Réseau Canopé, which is a branch of the French Ministry of Education in charge of training teachers all along their career. I have specialized in digital technologies for foreign language learning and teaching, and I am also a language science doctoral researcher at Université Paris-Cité, and I study tourism discourse on Irish websites in the field of discourse analysis. Right, to develop the 6 sessions, we have chosen topics that could be of interest for both GIHS and business students. So I'm going to focus on the first session, which deals with the creation of a poster to promote tourism of an Irish county. The first thing to underline is that students have to fulfill a mission that I'm going to translate for you. Tourism Ireland wants to produce a poster to promote tourism of an Irish county. This poster will be displayed in the Paris Metro. Tourism Ireland has decided to call on the talents of students to create this poster. A jury will meet to choose the best poster. Will you win the first prize? The poster should include the name of the county, a catchphrase, a top 5 of the county's tourism themes, and 5 photographs. It will have to be aimed at 3 main targets. The production will be evaluated on the attractiveness of the poster. It must attract attention, arouse interest and desire. Its readability, its originality as regards the Irish county's usual catchphrases, and the quality of the language. As you can see, it is an action-oriented task which requires linguistic, cultural, and pragmatic competencies. In this project, the lecturers could get in touch with professionals of Tourism Ireland or Fáilte Ireland to make up a jury. It would give sense to the production works, and it may hopefully motivate the students to give their best. They could indeed show their skills in front of professionals, and they would also have a physical output to develop a portfolio that they could use in the future for job applications or interviews. Let's take a look at the learning outcomes. There are vocabulary learning outcomes on many topics: nature, city tourism, heritage, gastronomy, etc. Grammar learning outcomes: the noun and its gender, the nominal group, the infinitive and the imperative forms, and cultural learning outcomes. The training session is divided into 3 steps. The aim of the first one is to learn how to write a catchphrase. The second deals with touristic themes, and the third provides instructions to complete the final task. In this session, the cultural learning outcomes mostly concern culture and heritage in Lorraine, the wonderful French region Sarah and I are from. Students could find interest in discovering cultural aspects of the country they study the language of. These cultural aspects on the photographs should be well chosen to draw attention and arouse curiosity or desire to learn. If the students find the content interesting and useful, they could be more engaged in their learning and they may better assimilate the contents of the training course. Then, the students could reuse what they have learned to design their poster. Let's focus now on the approaches we have used to enable students to follow the session and do the activities on their own. The first thing to mention is that all the instructions are in French, but we have formulated them for the A1 level, that is to say for basic users. So the sentences must be short and the words easy to understand. The aim is also to encourage lexical inferencing, and there are many transparent words to help, that is to say words that are quite similar to their equivalents in English. Let's have a look at this activity. In the instruction, thematic and correspond are transparent. The students should understand that mot suivant refers to the words below, and the type of interactive activity also helps to understand that cocher la bonne réponse means tick the right answer. In the activity, lac, forêt, and parc are transparent words. It is quite clear that these words refer to nature, nature, which helps to get the meaning of montagne, mountain. The next activity enables to get the meaning of verger. As you can see, the words are repeated in different activities, which could help with memorization. Let's talk now about the grammar approach. In the second step of the session, the students would have to focus on the structure of the nominal group. When the grammar rule is simple, it is just mentioned. When it is more difficult, students have to analyze examples to find the grammar rule, which corresponds to an inductive approach. Again, this work on grammar structures with a repetition of words could help with memorization. As you can see, the activities that we have prepared mostly concern the learning of words, grammatical structures, and cultural information. They are all designed for students to work on this in class with their lecturer or tutor, remotely with their lecturer or tutor, or totally remotely at their own pace, according to their timetable and according to their needs. How is it possible? Simply by adapting the activities given to the students, by adapting the feedback given to the students, by adding a resource booklet for the teachers or tutors, and by including additional tasks to be conducted in the classroom. It would also be interesting to test the students' linguistic and cultural skills or knowledge after they have completed steps 1 and 2. A quiz-based learning platform could be used to evaluate what they have actually learned or memorized. As you can see, I have chosen dishes because lunch is coming soon. The time in class could be used for 2 main activities if the students have worked remotely. First, for feedback, the students could have the opportunity to tell what was easy or difficult, interesting or not very significant, which would enable their lecturer to give methodological tips and maybe adapt the session for the next time. The moment in class could be the occasion as well to work in groups to consolidate what the students have learned in doing more complex tasks. In that session, the complex tasks could refer to the choice of the contents and the design of the poster. To conclude, what we have tried to do through these sessions is to create interactive resources for hybrid delivery with these 2 guidelines. First, develop the students' desire to learn the French language and culture. Second, develop the students' autonomy, responsibility, and open-mindedness. Sarah is now going to tell you more about the project. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so we did develop some of the sessions and got to integrate them into Moodle, and that allowed me to test out some of them with my own students. And the feedback was generally very positive. They really like having this kind of game experience where you're clicking on things and it's moving forward. You can repeat, you can do the things as you want at the time you want. Some of the comments we got was it was fun to work online. It felt like a game, which they really liked. They were learning about stuff they didn't know before, but their feedback also allowed us to try and work on improving what we had. The instructions were a little bit confusing for them. And what they really, really enjoyed was the accessibility, in that if it's on Moodle, they can go at it anytime and access it remotely very easly. So from my perspective, when they were doing the online or the testing with Moodle in the classroom, I was able to observe their behavior. Tu peux passer? And in terms of instructions, I found them quite mouse trigger happy. So they really wanted to get clicking as soon as possible and didn't necessarily read the instructions. So you nearly need to turn the instructions into a game itself or into a clicking activity for them to kind of pay attention to it. Sometimes they were very eager to rush through things. Again, to think about that in terms of assessment later or in terms of consolidating the learning. And from our side, the main issues is that all of these are extremely time consuming to develop, especially if you want to do anything in terms of adaptive feedback, because we are working with a system that is designed for English speakers. So anything to do with accents, anything to do with weird symbols or characters, you have to take that into consideration. So if somebody doesn't type the accent, is the word wrong for A1 level? Not necessarily. So you need to kind of build a lot of corrections into the system. So the verification process of all that is quite time consuming as well. Tu peux passer la prochaine, s'il te plaît? Voilà. So just to give you a brief outline of what is going to happen for the next while anyways, because Jean-Noël has done his job, so I need to kind of finish working on what we have. And I really want to consolidate the appearance of the instructions and pages to make them much more user-friendly. Finish creating a guidebook for the lecturers, tutors that include additional activities and suggestions on perhaps what to do, how to use the resources, re-pilot the resources again in September with my own students, but also with other students and other lecturers to see how they get on, and make the entire resources OERs, open educational resources with access to for external people as well. And again, because we've only worked on 6 sessions, A1, A2 level, there is a lot of scope for producing much more resources for each of the levels we mentioned, but also producing resources for additional levels. So again, maybe further settled funding, who knows. So that's it for us. Anyways, so if you have any questions, comments, I think now's the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah and Jean-Noël. If there's any questions in the audience, we can give Sarah or Jean-Noël. I know a lot of things. 2 seconds. Just 1 second, guys. We're going to pass around the microphone.
Hi, just a simple question. What did you build the quiz in software?
So we used H5P. So for the integration, we approached it from 2 different sides. We used the H5P in Moodle, but also the h5p.org website, because on the ATU Moodle page, it takes a very long time to do any changes and to upload the H5P if you're doing modification or anything like that. So some exercises, so like we have crosswords as well and things like that. So some of these are only available via Moodle, but you can download download a template and then go into the h5p.org to modify and to work way faster. So it's pretty much a mix of H5P via Moodle and H5P via h5p.org.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions?